eastwards on Tuesday.
At 6, another rise in interest rates, the 11th in a row, piling on the pressure for many people with mortgages or loans. Interest rates now stand at 4.25%, the highest level for 14 years, as the Bank of England keeps trying to slow inflation. Our other main story on the programme tonight is from right up on the front line in Ukraine. We have a special report as our correspondent, Quentin Somerville, follows Ukrainian troops fighting trench warfare there.
1, 2, 3, 4! We can't take it anymore!
Junior doctors in England escalate their strike action. They'll walk out for 4 days next month. And back to school. The head teacher, whose decision to put a defibrillator in the building ended up saving his own life.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, the Premier League's environmental credentials are under the spotlight, with the amount of plane travel questioned after a BBC investigation.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to their highest level for 14 years as it continues trying to curb inflation. Interest rates now stand at 4.25%, and to give you an idea of how much they have risen, they were right down at 0.1% at the start of December 2021. The latest rise comes a day after an unexpected jump in the rate of inflation. The Governor of the Bank of England did say he is much more hopeful now that the UK can avoid a recession, but he wouldn't say if interest rates had reached their peak yet or if they'd have to go even higher, putting even more pressure on homeowners and people with loans. Our economics editor Faisal Islam is here with all the details. Faisal.
Thanks, Sophie. Yes, the 11th rate rise in a row today. Interest rates at 4.25%. As you say, incredible to think that they were at 0.75% exactly a year ago. All of this designed to tame stubbornly high inflation. Now, UK interest rates are moving in a similar way to other major central banks. Here are the rates in the US and the Eurozone. And that has been the backdrop of a few blow-ups across the banking system, some US banks and a massive Swiss one needing rescuing. Rate rises here have had a consequence on business borrowing, rents and, of course, mortgages, with a typical tracker mortgage costing an extra £24 a month as a result of today's change alone. But if you add up all the rate rises over the last 16 months, it's more like £394 a month, thousands of pounds a year, something with an all too human cost, as we found out when we visited Neil in Cambridge.
Well, what does this house mean to us? It means everything. It means 20 years of memories.
But last year these letters started arriving from the bank, notifying Neil that his mortgage payments were increasing hugely.
In January last year we were paying £255 a month, and now from next month onwards we're having to pay £1,465.
That, Neil says, will force him and his seriously ill wife out of their home.
You despair quietly, inwardly, but I can't let that show, because you've got to keep things running here and do what you can to keep up with it.
A day on from surging fresh produce prices and stubborn inflation, the bank's further rise was expected, but there are some signs it could be the last rise for now.
We don't know whether it's going to be the peak. What I can tell you is that we've seen signs of inflation really peaking now, but of course it's far too high. Now, we think it's going to come down sharply, really from the early summer onwards, but we haven't seen that happen yet.
The Bank of England's been pretty gloomy over the last few months, and understandably so given the size of the Ukraine war's shock. But in today's interest rate deliberations, they have rowed back, so that a predicted recession may not now happen, that unemployment could stay flat and not go up. And whilst the economy does remain broadly stagnant, that's a lot better than expectations, given the sheer size of the energy price shock. One former rate-setting expert says the inflation battle is far from won.
It was not just that inflation went up, it was also that services inflation went up, it was that core inflation went up, food prices went up, even on the last month's basis, let alone in the last 3 months. So I know it was pretty significant that inflation is embedded.
The governor said authorities were vigilant over some international bank failures, such as America's Silicon Valley Bank, but there were no fears of a repeat of the financial crisis of a decade and a half ago. People shouldn't worry that it's a repeat of 2008.
No, I don't think it's a repeat of 2008 at all. Yeah, we've obviously increased the regulation of the banking system since then. We learned a lot of lessons in the financial crisis.
It is a three-way balancing act for the Bank of England on the financial system, the economy and inflation. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
And if you want to find out more about what those interest rates mean for you, along with useful tips and information, we do have a special section on the BBC website, and it is called Tackling It Together. You can find it by going to bbc.co.uk/news. Now, our other main story tonight comes from the front line of the war in Ukraine, where soldiers are engaged in fierce trench warfare, reminiscent of scenes from more than a century ago during World War I. The battles going on around the key city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine are some of the bloodiest seen during this entire year-long campaign, and yet neither side is gaining a significant advantage along a front line that stretches for hundreds of miles. Our correspondent Quentin Somerville and camera journalist Darren Conway have got right up to what's called Zero Line, the closest trench to the Russian positions south of Bakhmut. They were accompanied by a safety advisor, but even so, as you're about to see, there is very little cover to protect troops on the ground, and no one is safe.
Into a cratered no man's land where even tank armour can be breached. Up close and in range, Serhi's tank crew releases everything it's got against Russian targets. The enemy is just 500 metres away across this field. Watch Serhi's round hit, top right. The orders are get in, get out and take cover. We're right behind them.
Quickly!
Go to position. Go quickly. Go quickly.
Open ground is their enemy's friend.
Our tank worked successfully on the target, so the enemy artillery is now targeting us. Our drone spotters gave the tank crew the command to urgently roll back out of range, so our guys won't be hit by the enemy's artillery.
That
was a 120mm shell landing, maybe around 20 to 30 meters away from us.
A brief lull and it's time to move again. This is what a year of attacks has done to the town of Velika Novosilka. Once thriving, it's all but abandoned. And still Russian bombs fall here. A mortar lands to the right. The town has already been reduced to rubble. And yet another mortar lands. Even closer. They're zeroing in. Any movement here captures Russia's attention. In the town and on its outskirts, travelling in the open can be a matter of life or death. This road is within range of Russian guns and it has to be taken at speed. To a stricken wasteland where Russian eyes are always watching. Infantryman Dima, he's only 22 years old, is escorting us forward. The trenches we're heading to are about a kilometre ahead. And Dima's just told me that the village over here is half held by the Ukrainians and half held by the Russians.
Вовремя мы пришли, да?
Whoa!
Mortars, tank fire, grenades, they get hit by everything here.
Luva, fast, fast, fast!
Separated by incoming fire, camera journalist Darren Conway
In here.
calls us into the trench.
Stewie, there's a bunker here. Q. This way. Come on, run, run, run. Straight to me. Down, 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 down. Down. Get in, get down.
That's two Russian shells that have just come in. I think it's tank fire. Landing very close to these positions gives you an idea of how exposed it is here. There's absolutely no tree cover. The safest place for these men is in the trenches. They've already taken a couple of casualties here in the last week. The bombardments never stop.
We're standing at zero position and right now we're under mortar fire.
When the next one might be a direct hit, it's hard not to flinch. Does Dima think Russia could win here?
It's a good question. This question needs to be addressed to the senior military. Oh, that was close. What do you think? Can Russia win? I don't know. They have an unlimited amount of shells. They have entire warehouses full of them. They can shoot all day and they'll never run out of shells. And what about us? We will run out of shells this year. But we are forming various assault brigades, and we have been given tanks like Abrams. So I think with their help, we will win. And we are Cossacks. We are brave guys. We can handle it.
Okay, you and Dima go together and I will go with the other group.
Dima checks if the ground is clear. We won't go for now, he says. Dima welcomes the cover of darkness. A single shift here feels like a lifetime. Beyond these trees lurks a great danger. Their daily duty is holding it back. Their country's freedom depends on it. Russia could attack again at any moment. Dima and his comrades will be waiting. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Velika Novosilka.
Quentin Somerville and Darren Conway there on Zero Line in Ukraine, giving you a very clear idea of the brutality of the fighting on that front line. Junior doctors in England have announced another strike next month, this time for 4 days, as they intensify their fight for a pay rise of 35%. The walkouts will begin at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, the 11th of April, so just after the Easter weekend, and finish at 7 a.m. on Saturday, the 15th of April. Well, joining me is our health editor, Hugh Pym. So escalating this, the fight for more pay.
Yes, Sophie, this is set to be the longest action of its kind so far, and the planned 96-hour strike will be right after the Easter weekend, when traditionally hospitals are under more pressure because GP services and social care have been wound back a bit for the bank holiday. And of course, earlier this month we saw a 72-hour strike in England by junior doctors affecting all forms of care, and that resulted in 175,000 cancellations of routine operations and outpatient appointments. So NHS providers representing trusts are saying alarm bells really are ringing about the scale of disruption which could follow this. There were talks yesterday between the British Medical Association representing junior doctors and Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, but that meeting didn't last very long. The doctors want a 35% pay rise to compensate for previous inflation. Steve Barclay said that was unaffordable and an unnecessary precondition. The BMA have hit back and said it wasn't a precondition, they just wanted to get the talks going, but certainly no sign of any further talks or a resolution at this stage.
Hugh, thank you. A 28-year-old man has been remanded in custody, charged with attempted murder after 2 elderly men were set alight after leaving their local mosques. Mohammed Abkar, who lives in Edgbaston, appeared at Birmingham Magistrates Court today and was remanded in custody until the 20th of April. West Midlands Police are appealing to the community for any information that could help with their investigation. More than 2 million people in the UK turned to food banks for help in just 1 year as they struggled with the rising cost of living. That's according to the first set of official figures released by the government. 11% of families on state income-related benefits say they used a food bank in the last year. That compares with 3% of families in the UK overall. The figures cover the period from April 2021 to March 2022, so before the soaring energy price rises, which have put even more pressure on people's finances. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports.
So last week we had our busiest ever session. We had 119 households, which is just crazy.
The lines are getting longer, the need at times overwhelming. This food bank in South London occasionally runs out of stock.
Shall I give you a clean cup?
Yes, please. For the past 8 months, Nick Brown has had just £112 a month to live on, as his rising rent has eaten into his benefit payments.
The food bank is everything. It's basically survival or not. Basically because what we can't afford, we can get from the food bank. And on top of that, it just takes such a massive pressure off the food bill. For a lot of people, like myself, a lot of the time it means either starving or getting something to eat.
Some of the clients here are new, others have long struggled.
Everything is going up today, you know, like gas, electric, all the bills and shopping, everything. And it's a lot for us, it's not working.
Today's data suggests families on benefits, single-parent households and disabled people are the most likely to need help. But many food banks are becoming increasingly diverse.
The number of working people is actually really shocking. I'd say that's probably the most alarming trend we've seen in the last 12 months. So many people now have jobs, often full-time jobs, but it's not enough to get by. And also we just see a broader range of people. We now have people with mortgages that need the food bank that we never used to see before.
Many food banks have seen demands rise rapidly in the past few months, and the figures published today do not capture what has happened over the past 12 months when bills have soared and the impact that has had on many household budgets. 800,000 children live in households that needed a food bank, some of the 4.2 million children that are living in poverty, a figure that's increasing.
We really need to see more action to ensure that our social security system is doing a much better job of protecting people from going without the essentials.
Ministers say they've provided record levels of help to the poorest families, but so far it hasn't stopped huge numbers of people needing food banks to survive. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, South London.
The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. The Bank of England raises interest rates to 4.25%, their highest for 14 years, in an effort to curb inflation. And how an extraordinary organ trafficking plot to bring this man to Britain for his kidney was foiled.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, England kick off their Euro 2024 qualifying campaign tonight. They take on the defending champions Italy in Naples.
Now, would you fly from Newcastle to Liverpool, London to Leicester, or Birmingham to Blackpool? They're all journeys of 100 miles or so, and an investigation by BBC Sport has found that Premier League teams are doing just that, taking flights that on average last around 40 minutes. The BBC's research found that across 100 games, 81 short-haul domestic flights were used instead of road or rail. It, of course, raises all kinds of questions about the Premier League's commitment to reducing its environmental impact. Our sports editor, Dan Roan, has the story.
Everton arriving by coach for their match against Chelsea at the weekend. But this was just the final step of their journey to Stamford Bridge, having flown to London for the fixture 24 hours earlier, and they're far from alone. The BBC's uncovered evidence that in just 2 months there were 81 domestic flights by Premier League clubs across just 100 matches, including cup competitions, and that the shortest flight was just 27 minutes. One top manager admits it's an issue the game must now tackle.
I think it's something we have to do better with. It's my personal opinion. That's not to say it's straightforward because there's factors, but I think it's an area we can improve.
But it's not just the planes that take teams to fixtures. A positioning flight, as it's known, arriving at Liverpool Airport last week to pick up Everton for just a 35-minute journey south for that game against Chelsea. One of 37 such flights, often largely empty, that we found evidence of in the 2-month window. Premier League teams taking short domestic flights like this one to and from matches, despite it being worse for the environment than travelling by road or rail, has raised serious questions over just how committed the top of the sport truly is to sustainability. Last weekend, a positioning flight came all the way from Inverness to take Bournemouth to Birmingham for a match against Aston Villa, the plane going on empty to Liverpool. The next day, another positioning flight from Aberdeen picked the team up and took them home before returning back to Scotland. League One Forest Green Rovers are known as the country's most sustainable club, and its owner told me he was dismayed by our findings.
I think it's shocking data in just 2 months. It's an illusion to think there is a gain for a flight of that duration. You know, modern coaches are very comfortable and aren't going to impair the performance of a player over that relatively short distance. The carbon impact is one thing, and it might not be the biggest thing, but the optics. You've got Premier League teams setting a very bad example for the rest of the country.
The FA says it's the responsibility of each club to make their own travel choices, and some in the game point out these flights make up a small proportion of domestic air travel. In a statement, the Premier League said it recognises the need to take action on climate change and is committed to reducing its overall climate impact. This includes aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. A generation ago, it was all very different.
What's the theory then behind hiring a plane to fly Bournemouth to an away match? It's a bit extravagant.
Yeah, it's only a one-off though, Tony.
But these days, with more money and more matches in football than ever, persuading top clubs to remain grounded could be a challenge. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Now to an extraordinary story involving a Nigerian politician and his wife and a plot to get a 21-year-old man to the UK where they plan to take his kidney for their daughter who has a serious medical condition. Now the husband and wife, along with a medical middleman, are facing jail after they were found guilty at the Old Bailey of conspiring to arrange the travel of a young man with a view to exploiting him for his body part. Their daughter was acquitted. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
A young Nigerian man walks into a West London police station with a remarkable story. He's run away because people want to take his kidney. Weeks before, Daniel, not his real name, had been selling mobile phone accessories in the markets of Lagos. At the other end of the Nigerian social scale, Ike Ekweremadu, a powerful senator, and his wife Beatrice. Their daughter Sonia has a debilitating kidney condition. She needs a transplant. For help, Ekweremadu turned to this man, Dr. Obinna Abita.
I'm fine, I'm okay.
Who'd posted his own transplant on Facebook after finding a young Nigerian donor. Abita suggested his donor's friend, Daniel. In Lagos, the young market trader was told to get some tests. He thought a wealthy man was helping him travel to Britain for a better life.
He was told that there would be some form of employment for him, in a manner, some form of assistance.
Was he told that he would be required to give a kidney?
My understanding is that that was never a subject of discussion.
He flew to Britain. There was no job.
While waiting for meetings with doctors, he slept on a sofa at a flat where Dr. Abita lived here in South London. And he was taken for lunch at this restaurant. And there was a reason for that.
Sonia Akweramadu was there, and her picture was taken with Daniel. While she was acquitted, the court heard her parents and Abita were falsely claiming Daniel and Sonia were cousins. When Daniel met doctors here, he suddenly realised why he was in Britain. The doctors called a halt to the transplant. The senator, his wife and the middleman convicted in a case which is the first of its kind, though investigations continue into whether others were involved. Tom Simons, BBC News at the Old Bailey.
A brief look at some of the other stories making the news today now. And the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has promised to cut violence against women and girls and knife crime by 50% if he wins the next general election. In a speech in Stoke-on-Trent, he pledged to restore confidence in police to its highest ever level and make Britain's streets safe. The chief executive of the social media giant TikTok has told a congressional committee in Washington that the Chinese-owned social media app is not a threat to US national security. It comes as pressure mounts for an outright ban on the app in the United States because of national security concerns. Meanwhile, here in the UK, Parliament has announced it is blocking TikTok on all parliamentary devices and networks. The Scottish Government has also today banned TikTok from all its official mobile phones. Nicola Sturgeon has faced her final First Minister's questions in the Scottish Parliament. Voting is still ongoing to choose a new leader of the Scottish National Party. Ms Sturgeon, who's held the position for 8 years, received a standing ovation from colleagues and said being First Minister had been the privilege of her lifetime. World Athletics has banned transgender female athletes from competing in the female category at international events. The governing body's president, Lord Coe, said no female transgender athlete who had gone through male puberty would be permitted to compete in female world ranking competitions from the 31st of March. Our sports correspondent Alex Capstick is in Salford for us now. This has just been announced a short time ago. Tell us more details.
Yes, Lord Sebastian Coe, who's the president of World Athletics, has been laying out the new transgender policy, and it's similar to those adopted by swimming and rugby. So as you said, anyone who's been through male puberty will not be able to compete at elite female events. And he said the decision was made to protect the integrity of the female category, and after consulting with the trans community and the International Olympic Committee. This is not the end of the matter. A working group will be set up to study evidence as it emerges, but as it stands, he said, with the science so unclear, he had no choice but to act decisively. Meanwhile, the rules surrounding DSD athletes, that's those with differences of sexual development, they have been tightened. They must lower their testosterone levels from 5 to a maximum of 2.5 nanomoles per litre. And that's important for World Athletics because at the moment there are 13 DSD international athletes while there are no trans athletes.
Alex, thank you. We finish tonight with the head teacher who says he is the luckiest head teacher alive. And that's because his decision to install a life-saving defibrillator in his own school ended up saving his own life, as John Maguire explains.
It's the first day back at a highly excited Birkdale Primary School in Lancashire for their head teacher, Nick Sheeran. He's been off work since the final day of term last summer when he suffered a cardiac arrest in the playground and was saved by staff using one of the school's defibrillators.
I'm the luckiest head teacher on the planet, really. I'm so grateful to everyone and the part that they played in saving my life and allowing me to be back in school today for the first time in months and months. I'm all raring to go.
The staff reaction took just 32 seconds.
If you'd have asked me several years ago, do you think you'd ever be able to do chest compressions on someone and use a defib, I'd have probably gone, no, I'm not one of those people that could step up and do that. but actually something happens.
There was no negative, there was no what's going to happen, it was all very positive. You know, this is what we do, these are the roles we've got, we'll carry this out and the outcome will be positive.
Nick's the 68th person to be treated by a defibrillator and training donated by the charity set up by Mark King, whose son Ollie died after a cardiac arrest when he was just 12 years old. Birkdale installed the machines after a previous visit from Mark.
Very emotional seeing the kids all, when I do assembly with all the kids, I just see Ollie's face in there, you know, and it's really, really ecstatic that our defib that was there, that we trained his staff on, was used to save his life.
The head's return also means the school band are getting back together. This is ABCD and Mark is Star of the Week. Following his campaign, the government's pledged to put machines into all schools in England by the summer. It's hoped they won't be needed, but if that need arises, they'll be there, ready for deployment, ready to save precious lives. John Maguire, BBC News, Birkdale, near Southport.
Time now for a look at the weather. Thomas Schaffernacker is here with some very moody looking skies.
Indeed, starting with this rather angry looking sky, and that's exactly what's on the way for tomorrow. A bit of everything really. Thunder and lightning, hail, downpours, gusty winds as well. It's really looking very unsettled over the next few days, and then come the weekend, a dose of colder weather. Now look at this conveyor belt of clouds sweeping across southern parts of the UK, bringing rain and a rash of showers on the cards for the next few days. Now you can see these speckled areas of rain sweeping across the country through the course of this evening, with clear spells in between. Freshening winds as an area of low pressure just to the west of Ireland here approaches us. These are the morning temperatures, nothing particularly cold, 7 degrees in London, around 5 degrees in Aberdeen, about that for our friends in Lerwick. And then tomorrow, this low pressure will barrel over Ireland, and where you see these isobars tightly packed, that's where we've got strong winds rushing out of the southwest, pushing in these fast-moving showers, lots of big cumulonimbus clouds tomorrow, a few rainbows thrown in as well where the sun comes out. It certainly won't be raining all the time tomorrow, and these shower clouds will be moving swiftly through. So that was Friday. This is Saturday. One low pressure is out of the way. This next one's approaching. We're in between weather systems, but it still means there'll be some showers around. I think on Saturday you're more likely to catch them across northern parts of England. In the south it'll be brighter, and it'll be brighter also in Scotland. Temperatures 13 in London on Saturday, 7 degrees in the north. That is a hint of things to come, because by Sunday the wind crucially changes direction. It's coming all the way from the Norwegian Sea, pushing that mild air towards the south. So we're in for, I suppose we could call it a cold snap for Scotland, because there'll be some wintry showers across the northern hills, but single figure temperatures as far south as the Midlands, maybe scraping 10 degrees. So a real chill in the air to come on Sunday. Back to you.
Thomas, thank you. And that's it from the BBC News at 6. The news continues here on BBC One as it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.